Well, the YouTube is taking a little longer than usual to click in, but meanwhile, we are recording. So here we are. Michael D. Shaw is my guest, and Michael is a columnist with various sites that where he reports primarily on health matters and examining health industry, drug companies, the coronavirus, etc. Mike, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, pleasure to be here.
So, Mike, we have this situation now where this young boy was shot, cold blood, murdered,
Right.
uh, right in front of his house. I think he's like 6 years old, and there's not been a lot of reportage, if you will, in the media with regard to what this case involved. So, why don't you give us a little background in terms of what happened here?
Okay. Well, the incident and the timing is very important here, as you'll see. The incident took place on August 9th. Um, the media coverage started immediately locally, and then a small number of, well, let's back up. The right-wing internet jumped on it almost immediately, uh, and then embarrassed by this coverage, if you will, I think Fox got on it.
Hmm.
Um, and by the end of the week, on Friday, then dutiful reporting was done by like the Washington Post and CNN. But it was interesting that part of that reporting was stating that somehow conservatives feel that this story has been neglected. And that became part of their story, as if it's perfectly okay to wait 5 days to cover something like this, uh,
Hmm.
when you consider the nonstop, over-the-top coverage of the George Floyd situation.
Right. I mean, it's a classic case of projection. In other words, they didn't cover it, and then when they finally decided to cover it, they blame conservatives for claiming that they weren't covering it.
Which
Basically.
somehow is weird, but there you go.
Well, I mean,
So,
this is how these things work. It's a very interesting psychology. I mean, I could give you a quick example
sure.
of how that's worked recently, in that they played rope a dope with President Trump by the Newsweek, which is a big liberal magazine, published an editorial claim questioning the legitimacy of Kamala Harris as a
Oh,
candidate for
John Eastman.
president.
Yeah,
Oh, is that right? Okay.
yeah.
And then they withdrew. They waited for a day or two with a lot of outrage, and then they withdrew the article and denounced it. But in the meantime, a reporter was able to ask President Trump about it in a press conference, and whether he thought this was true. And Trump basically said, "I have no idea, but I'm going to look into it." And they used that as a template to try to not only attack Trump as being a birther in this case, but also distract any comments early in the campaign and any attention that might be brought to Kamala Harris's dismal record. Now, I don't know. I'm not an advisor to Trump, but if I were Trump, I would have done one of two things. Because he could have seen that coming. He could have said, "No, I think she's fine. She's a citizen and she should run," or just no comment. Period. But he kind of
Well, he,
stepped. He
he
kind of
did.
stepped in it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was sort of a curious.
It was a
Uh,
setup. This was a bait and switch. They rope a dope, as they say. I mean, they were trying to catch Trump. He gives these interviews, and then they'll find something in there that doesn't quite look perfect, and they'll magnify that and say, "Look, a bombshell. Oh, this is a shocker," right? Whereas Biden isn't doing any interviews at all. He won't even go. He won't go out with Chris Wallace. He won't do anything. He doesn't appear live, nor will he, because he's so horrible.
yeah, I'm not sure how they think they can keep that up, but
I don't know.
the real sad thing of this story, beyond the lack of the media coverage vis-a-vis the over-the-top coverage of Floyd, is that this proves what people have been thinking for quite a while, that here's an innocent child, and somehow that's inferior to a career criminal, degenerate thug like Floyd, um, and we should be more concerned about that. uh, I think it even goes beyond race to some extent, because more important than race to the left is there are two key issues: abortion and homosexuality, uh, both of which one can argue gets away from innocence and life. So they really can't say much about killing a 5-year-old kid. There was some, as I'm sure you're aware, there was some terrible reaction on Twitter by some Black Lives Matter people who said, well, you know, the kid had it coming, white privilege, and so on. So it,
Oh my God! I mean, the only reason they don't talk about it is because the kid happens to be white. I mean, it's just pure racism, actually.
yeah,
It's
yeah. Well, I mean,
ridiculous.
that's a large part of it, even though there probably wasn't any racism in the case itself.
No, but the
Uh,
fact the kid was white doesn't make it worthy of being discussed. If
yeah.
he was black, we would never have heard the end of it.
Oh, um, that goes
Although,
without saying.
unless the perpetrator was black, as in the case in Chicago, where 3 black children were murdered right after the Floyd business, and that nothing was discussed about that because it was a black person who did it.
Well,
I mean, it's
at
complete racism.
what point does, I mean, I'm not talking about myself, but at what point does the credibility of the media disappear permanently to the point they can't make it up? You know, you can't repair it after a point. You know, what more can they do to lose trust? It they just keep going along like there's no problem, and they're, you know, running their own little game here. Um, how many insults have to add up before people just say, hey, you know what, enough? I'm turning
Well,
it
I mean,
off.
they have the control of the high ground. I mean, they've got control of the mainstream media. They've got control of the internet. You know, I wonder how long. You know, they're taking programs off the air, off the internet,
Yeah.
left and right. I'm just, you know, I wake up every day and take a look at my station to see whether I'm still on there, and I suspect
Huh.
at some point I probably won't be.
Yeah.
You know, because they're just removing, and they've removed some big shows too recently. So you know, there's an all out war against anyone that doesn't genuflect to the left. It's just that simple. Anyone, and it's going to get uglier and it's going to get meaner as the election approaches.
Well, you're, you know, a pundit, and certainly there are people that have their own individual reactions, but what about the proverbial man in the street? What does
Well,
he
that's
think
it.
about this? Uh, does
Well,
anybody
I
know?
think I think they're trying to. They assume that they can constrict access to information and control the means. Yeah, this is what socialism is: public ownership of the means of communication. That's what they're trying to do. They want to own the message. They want to own what people hear. Most people are too busy trying to work to pay their taxes. You know, which go, you know, up till June. I mean, to even hear alternative medias. They get the news from Lester Holt and the mainstream press, which is all this canned negative news. You know, this atrocity propaganda around the pandemic, of course, and then they hear trivial attacks against Trump and conservatives.
Well, what do you suppose the audience is? You know, who is a rabid consumer of the Washington Post, for example?
Well,
Uh,
probably nobody, and I don't think they even care. I mean, Jeff Bezos owns it. He probably doesn't care. Same thing with the New York Times. But the problem is that they are the papers of note and that they do set the stage for everyone else. So, you know, when they come out with something that is looked at and copied with variations by all of the mainstream press, all the mainstream big city newspapers, the 3 big networks, CNN and those people, all the big radio hosts, everybody looks to that, and that's what it's not so much their actual size, which is probably not big. It's the reverberation, it's the echo chamber.
okay, but I happen to get the Post and the Washington Times, and I live in this area, and virtually every article is written with an anti-Trump spin,
Yeah.
even though he's not even part of the story. the official obituary of Robert Trump ended
Oh,
up
what a
being an attack on
disgrace.
Donald Trump.
Can you imagine that? How low can they go? You know, you'd think that with an obituary, they might keep politics out of it and just, you usually traditionally in an obituary, you try to accentuate the positive about someone instead of using this as an attack. I mean, it's ugly. It's just, I mean, I really admire the fact that Trump wades through this and puts up with it. I think he is doing so now because I think that he knows he's going to win, and probably big. He sees the internal polls, not the phony polls that we're all
Yeah.
viewing. And I think there very well may be some flipping of states that had traditionally not gone to Trump because of things like the riots, like, for example, Minnesota, maybe, possibly even Oregon, who knows?
Huh.
Because the big cities in those states are being destroyed, and people on the street. I even saw something, people on the street in Seattle are actually beginning to question this rotten establishment that's been running this state for decades. And maybe that, there could be a few points shaved off there. You might have people actually wake up and realize who they are, and that they have an interest, and that they want to have a future in this country. I don't know. So far, I mean, it's hard to tell. What are your thoughts about the Democratic convention? Did you see any of that?
Only some lowlights that were rebroadcast, but it seems to be overwhelmingly negative. Uh,
Seems like
and
the
I'm not
only thing
sure.
they're talking about is bad, Orange Man bad. You know, right? I mean, there's nothing said about what they believe in. There's nothing said.
Yeah.
I mean, what's their position on immigration and on the border, for example? What is their position on any number of issues?
Oh, what's their
That
position on these riots? They haven't said anything.
No, they won't comment on it. They won't. They try to, and the media is trying to downplay it. People don't even know what's going on, and there's no real vision of what they have in mind as a governing party. That's what a convention is supposed to do. It's supposed to define the party and the candidates, and and give an example of what people can expect from them. And they're not doing that. They're just attacking Trump, and I don't think that's going to fly. I mean, I think people are getting tired of that. I think people are sick and tired of this ridiculous and obnoxious claim that Donald Trump has something against black people. They don't believe that. It's so obviously false. And I think that, in fact, recently there was a poll done right after Harris was named that indicates that something like 35% of the black community is not supportive. That's huge. I mean, that's
Oh,
a
yeah.
big number.
Well, I mean, truth be told, I guess you can call yourself whatever you want. Ask Elizabeth Warren, but she's half Indian and half Jamaican, and for the most part, obviously there's exceptions. Jamaicans, of course, are a mixed uh, bag, tending more toward the light side, but with Caribe Indians and so on put in. So she's not a foundational black person by any stretch of the imagination. Uh, but I guess she gets
Well,
away with
I
calling
don't know if
herself.
that matters. I mean, neither was Barack Obama, but that's beside the point. I think the problem with her is that her record as Attorney General in California was
Oh,
horrible. I mean, it was. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard nailed it during one of the debates.
absolutely.
She pointed out that Harris had was convicted up to 1,500 people, predominantly black men, for minor possession of marijuana, and put them in prison. And the question needs to be asked, if the reporters had any integrity at all, if they wanted to do an investigation, which they don't, they would look at whether or not, first of all, the prison system in California has been privatized to a certain extent. What extent was that? Did that influence her policies in terms of putting people in those private prisons, which are profit driven and which are big donors to the Democratic Party and Democratic candidates? Did that play a role? I mean, she also apparently withheld, according to Tulsi Gabbard, she withheld important information, exculpatory information around death row inmate, convicts.
That's right.
Which doesn't kind of fly well in terms of people getting a fair shake in the criminal justice system. Meanwhile, President Trump signed the First Step Act, which released, I think it was like 10,000 prisoners for minor crimes. Maybe some of them were the very people she put in. I don't know.
Well, it could be, but it's all just gross political expediency on her part. Um, and I don't even know what the constituency is for Kamala Harris. I truly don't. She
No, she was an
got to
abysmal
whatever
candidate.
position she did with the Willie Brown relationship, and he himself was dirty as hell
Right.
uh,
Not exactly.
within the San Francisco scheme. Um, so she talks herself into attorney general. By all reports, does a miserable job. Uh, runs for senator, I guess, because if you're a female in California and a Democrat, you have to be the senator. There's
It's a
there's a
female
long
seat. Yeah.
litany of incompetent senators in my former state. So it's it's just completely cynical. But what does she bring to the ticket for Biden? That's what I like to know. She's
Well, we'll have to.
unlikable.
Yeah, she's not exactly popular person. She did abysmally in the presidential primaries. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, she's going to give a lot. She's one of the few live speakers. I don't know what are they going to do. What are they going to do with Biden? I mean, is he going to go live? He doesn't appear without a teleprompter.
No, it's going to be recorded.
Yeah, he won't.
Yeah.
He doesn't take questions. The few press appearances they had, there were no questions. He read a prepared statement, which he could barely do. It's sad in a way. I mean, the man is obviously past his prime. And meanwhile, the corruption probe is continuing into his family. Information is still coming out about that. And, the whole can of worms that was opened up with the phony impeachment is something that isn't, I don't think, going away. I think that I feel reluctant to talk about it here on YouTube because I could lose my station for that. YouTube just came out with a new rules saying that anyone who disseminates information that is obtained questionably, they'll be removed. So, let's
Obtained questionably.
or some vague language like that. I
Yeah.
mean, it's new, so we have to be a little bit opaque in our conversation about these things. It's kind of like
Okay, well, who gave him the great advice to be interviewed by Cardi B?
I don't know. I mean, how did that go, anyways?
Oh, it was a joke. First of all, it was heavily edited, virtually in the middle of words. Uh, I mean, she's a vulgar individual, as you know,
Right.
and I can understand. I would sympathize in this sense with Biden because he has enough trouble understanding, and it's hard to understand what she says anyway. Uh, but why he thought that was a good idea to put that person on interviewing him is mind-boggling. And then he agrees to everything she says: free education, free healthcare, free this, free that. And she's the same person that said that she doesn't see how people can live on under $250,000 a month. So
So what? I mean, maybe they just thought it would be. Is this their idea of reaching out to younger people? I don't know. Are younger people going for this? Do they think? I mean, I don't think
well,
that.
she is a popular rapper. Um, and traditionally, the audience for rap is much more heavily white than black. These wannabe white kids. But I just, I've followed her career a little bit. I have a background in the music industry. And she just looks more repellent than she did when she started. I don't know what the deal is here. But,
Yeah, it's pretty strange.
and Bacardi should have sued her from the jump anyway by naming herself essentially after the rum, changing one letter. So,
Brother.
yeah, that's what it was.
I don't think that from my younger age, left leaning or left wing sources, teenage left wingers in young 20s, they don't like Kamala Harris. Now I don't know what does that mean they'd vote for Trump? Probably not. But they don't like they know about her record these are people who are very fuzzy with prisons. They know her record on that, and maybe they'll stay home. I don't know. That's probably the best we could hope for.
Well, I mean, what is your sense on this? Um, you
I
notice how those polls have gotten a lot closer.
My sense is that there's nothing that compelling about either one of them to bring people out to vote. I mean, at least with Barack Obama, yes, he was the first black man on a major ticket. I get that. Even Hillary, first woman. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is how people think, unfortunately, but that's the way it goes. It's people do. A lot of Americans are like sheep. They'll support that kind of thing. I get that in a way. I remember when Al Gore, for example, picked Joe Lieberman for his candidate. I happen to be a Jew,
Right.
and I felt excited for one day. I was, I was like, wow, I never thought a Jew would be in the presidential run in my lifetime. I was quite moved for a day, and then I got
For a
over
day.
it. Yeah, and I got over it. But at the same time, I get it. There is something about that I mean, and I certainly got it with Barack Obama. Yeah, it was probably one of the few redeeming values of him was that he was black, and that did mean something. So, but I think with Biden, there's nothing there. There's no, he doesn't have those sorts of bona fides. He's got a background as a segregationist. He's a growly old guy. He doesn't have any. There's no sense of like connection. So I don't think people are going to come out for that reason. And also, the only thing, I mean, I was talking yesterday with David Horowitz about this.
Oh,
A great guy. I mean, he was
yeah.
a tremendous figure. And I asked him, what did he think? Because his book is like, Trump is going to swamp the election. What does he think the Democrats are going to pull at the last minute? What's going to be the October surprise? They've got they've tried two impeachments. They've used the coronavirus as a political lever. They're sending gangs out on the street to loot black businesses and burn black neighborhoods and kill black people. What are they going to do now? And his answer was that there's going to be, organized by George Soros and the former Occupy Wall Street people, combined with all these other groups, a march on Washington in October. And you're going to see people try to occupy the White House in October.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and they're trying to, like 100,000 people they're going to try to get, and they're going to stay in the occupation right up till Election Day. Apparently, this is something that's being planned. Um,
And how do they think that's going to benefit their side?
this is the Hail Mary. I don't know. This is the final pass. I mean, I think that what is going to happen is that they don't realize that Washington is not Portland, Oregon. It's not Minneapolis. They're going to be met with hard force. They're going to be
Oh, yeah.
swept up, put in prison, taken away. They're not going to. It's just not going to happen. They'll be, and I think the country will applaud. I think when that happens, I think
Yeah.
people are
Well,
getting
there's a
sick
there's
and
a
tired
difference.
of all of this crap. Where they put this spray painting and statues of George Washington. I think people are getting sick of it.
Well, it is funny that Trump was ridiculed when he said first they start with Confederates and then they're going to go after George Washington. And
Yeah,
of course, that happened.
exactly.
Uh, and on a personal note, as a Catholic, I found it offensive and funny at the same time that Ocasio-Cortez goes after Father Damien,
Oh my God. Yeah, can you
which
imagine?
which was so stupid. He's a beloved
Of
figure
course, he's
in
saintly.
Hawaii.
Yeah, I mean he's a saint. He went
He
to
is a
the
saint.
leper colony, and he ended up sacrificing his life trying to minister to lepers. I mean,
Yeah,
this is like, yeah, what a. And then she wants to boycott Goya beans because the president said something nice
that
about
didn't
Trump.
work out.
No, I mean I think that it's oh, I don't know if you probably have heard her speak. She's so dumb. I think that it's all hopefully backfiring. Who knows? I mean, I think that he's going to pick up votes and increase his margin in every state. He's going to pick up a few states he didn't have last time. And
Yeah.
I think that the Republicans very well may take back the House, which would be freaking amazing.
Well, here's an interesting thing. How many, once you get out of political junkies like you and me and so on, how many people are consumed by Orange Man bad? I mean, even among registered Democrats.
No, I don't think any more than people who always have been hardcore left, and that's maybe 20-25% of the country
Okay.
consistently. I think that the main question is that middle ground, people who may not like Trump, right? I mean, but yet, they're not like consumed by this irrational in-choate rage. They may, they would consider supporting him if the other side is so horrible. And I think that's, the so-called swing vote who, that's the question, where they're going to tilt. And I mean, I think that in the long run they will go with Trump because this is a time of crisis, and usually people don't want to switch horses in the middle of a stream, so to speak. Um, I actually think that Trump may peel off maybe even 1 or 2% of people from my tribe because of this
One or
business,
two.
if we're lucky, because of like things like facilitating a peace agreement between
Right.
Israel and the United Arab Emirates, and now there's one coming up with Oman and Bahrain. These are significant developments in peace in terms of bringing about a normalcy in the Middle East, which is what most Jews want to see happen. They want to see an end to the war or an end to the threats. And that would never have happened. I mean, can you imagine Biden tried to take credit for this? It would never have happened under Obama because Obama tilted to the Iranians.
Well, Biden did try to take credit for it,
Yeah.
and he was bitch slapped by the ambassador. Uh, I'm sorry, I forget his name. The
Friedman.
Israeli ambassador.
Friedman.
Yeah, Friedman, and I mean, in no uncertain terms, in very non-diplomatic terms, like, no, he had nothing to do with it, and in fact, he was against it. No, 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 no. So it was, yeah, it was pretty hard.
And if it had been Obama, he would have got a Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think all of these things augur well. We'll see. It's a real nail biter because of obviously what the Democrats are capable of doing. I mean, this whole business with the post office, they want to stuff the ballot box on a national level. They want to swamp the system. This is what Acorn used to try to do with ballots. I mean, I wrote a book about Acorn. Every 2 years, every election, they would try to swamp the local precincts with fake votes as a way to overwhelm the system and get in their candidate. That's what this is, and it's already proving to be so. There's already been 10,000 ballots thrown out in Michigan, and Michigan is run by that witch of a governor.
Oh,
This is right, the wicked witch of the Midwest.
how did she get in?
I don't know, but I mean, I'm saying even they had to throw out 10,000 ballots. So if they had to do it, that it's corrupt. New
Well, what
Jersey,
is
California. I mean, they're sending out ballots in huge bags. Can you
right?
imagine? In California, they're mailing out, what is it? How many millions of ballots?
50 million, I think.
And those are,
40
look,
million, something like that.
let's just visualize this for a second. We're talking about enormous, big sacks of votes, right? From the post office. And we know that the postal union's already endorsed Biden, by the way.
Yeah.
Now, does that tell you that there might not be a possibility that some of those big sacks might end up in some building somewhere where where there might be people waiting for it to do things with it? I mean, really? I mean, let's use common sense here.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, but what is it about these people that their entire life is consumed by this political process? I mean, is it they hate themselves? They don't have a family. Can you imagine spending 25 hours a day on left-wing politics? But that's what they
Oh my
do.
God, I'd rather hang myself. The, they
Now,
don't have much of a. I mean, look, they don't have an internal. We're getting maybe a little psychological here, but they don't have much of an internal life. Everything
yeah,
is a reaction. It's like they have a computer chip implanted in their brains. There's no belief in God, for one thing.
Right.
There's no belief in any kind of a eternal moral and ethical code by which you live by and which you support and you promote. There's only power. I mean, this is what the left is. You strip away all of the conventional notions that make us human beings and separate us from the animals, and all you have is this search for and lust for power that validates you, that makes you feel. And when you join up with other people who are like-minded, you become like a wolf pack. You surrender your sovereignty in a way. And again, we're talking psychologically here. You surrender your own unique identity, and you become, in exchange, you get this empowering, almost intoxicating feeling of acceptance, and the ability to change the world, and you feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself, that without questioning it, there's a lot of rewards. Plus, in a practical sense, you get the door opens to you for opportunity if you genuflect to the left, especially if you're a young person. If you're a college student, get good dates, get invited to parties. You don't get ostracized. You don't get shunned and attacked. It's easy.
I don't know.
I think it's, yeah.
Are there any attractive left-wing women?
Well,
You might get dates,
I
but
have
would you
like a,
want them?
yeah, I have an image come to mind that I'm not going to share, but
Yeah, well, I have
but
an
I'm just
idea
saying
what it
most,
might be.
yeah, but look, I mean, most of the young college kids automatically genuflect left because that's where the power is, and
Right.
to do otherwise, you become hated and you become ostracized. That is a fact. These are power. The power of social powers are very, very powerful forces. And they control that part of the high ground. They control that part of the culture.
Okay, but how come those people, some of them, never change? You, I'm sure, being in this hotbed of conservatism in the Boston area, have probably met some hardcore leftists
I certainly have.
who are not young.
I know them at all ages. But
So
yeah, I mean,
my,
because I think they don't change because it's a religion. It's a belief system, and when you're in it, and you invest in it, it's difficult to admit that you're wrong. It's difficult to look within. I mean, these people don't have, as they say, much of an internal life. It's more that they've probably at a fairly young age they sold out to this. They sold their soul, and they're never going to look back, and they're never going to look within. There's no self reflection. It's all just goose stepping along into the great and glorious sunlit future.
no matter how many failures
That's
actually
right.
occur.
Oh, it has nothing to do with it. It's all because they didn't get it right. Soviet Union, oh, they should have been more pure. They made mistakes. They didn't try hard enough. Maybe we should do a better one.
Well, there you go. But you're saying that maybe that represents 20 to 25%.
I don't think it represents more than that. It's always, I think it's been fairly constant. I mean, we could go back in American history. I think that probably the high mark for the socialist movement was Eugene Debs,
Yeah,
who I think garnered 20% of the vote in the election of, was it 1909? I think
yeah, it was
1908.
early.
Yeah. And by the way, by today's standards, he'd probably be a conservative. But
Well,
uh,
Norman Thomas ran 7 or 8 times.
Norman Thomas, and he was a real truth teller, by the way. Norman Thomas once was asked, I don't have the quote in front of me, but he was a socialist candidate in the 1930s. And he said, look, we don't have to be elected as socialists because all of the things we stand for will be part of America in the next 50 years. It's all going to be, the major parties will, one or the other will absorb it, which is what's happened in American history usually. I mean, whenever there's a third party, the principles of the two parties, either one of the two parties will absorb that party and it becomes part of them, or the party disintegrates and disappears. We could look at like the Whigs became the Republicans, the progressives became the Democrats.
Right.
The anti-Mason movement became the Whigs. There's like it's kind of a process of osmosis. And yeah, I think that now the Democrats are the democratic socialists. I mean, they have gone way out on the left, and I don't know. I think that maybe the same thing might happen now that happened in 1972 with McGovern, who lost 49 states. It
Huh.
just right. It didn't connect with average Americans, and the result was that the Democratic Party was thrown on its heels for 30 years. I mean, they only came back because they got a centrist candidate like Bill Clinton.
Well, as a matter of fact, the now that you remind me of the George McGovern thing, in fact, he had more of a history, though. He was in the war, and he didn't really
Right.
start going bad until maybe 10 or 15 years before he ran. But he was like a stand-up guy, uh,
Sure.
and then went whichever direction he
He
went.
shifted left. Yeah.
But Biden, by the way, you talked
Never
about the
respected.
convention.
Yeah.
What do you make of those quote Republicans that spoke? You had Christy Todd Whitman, who never
Ugh,
was.
just the worst. I didn't see it. I will tell you. I mean, I'm going. I just I watched other things. I just didn't get to it. But this is the hate. They're just the hate Trump movement. I mean, it's the same people that tried to stop him in 2016. They don't have any constituency. They're just they're fools. I mean, they look ridiculous.
But so what are they hoping to do? Get some publicity out of it?
Yeah, they want to get the faces, big fat faces in the media. That's why Republicans, it's hard to be. It goes to the same social pressures that college students face. You're in politics. You're writing a book. You want to get a little attention. You have to genuflect to the media narrative, and that's what they're doing. So they can get their big fat faces in the paper. They can be mentioned. They can feel like they're relevant again. The best way to do
Well,
that is look at Trump's niece. I mean, she's making millions of dollars because she was angry that her grandparents cut her out of the will. All right. I mean, she knows the constituency. She knows the market is there. She knows these people are going to run and buy the book, and she'll make money, and that'll be her revenge. Plus, she gets to screw her family.
well, I mean, at least in her case, there's a monetary uh, reason.
But she's being feted by the big media. I think the New
Yeah.
York Times did a piece, and her picture is everywhere, and she's being lauded. It's very appealing. Look at I could speak to that. I ran for office. It is very addictive. It brings you in, and you suddenly feel like, wow, reporters are calling me. They want my opinion. They want to hear from me. They're sending a photographer. I'm not kidding. It is
Mm.
takes a it's hard. I mean, I've seen people in politics. When I was doing this, I saw other people who were just hooked on it. I'm not going to mention names, but one of them turned out to be a Massachusetts senator later on,
Oh,
who just they became their ego went through the roof. It became like it's almost like a physical adrenaline addiction. I mean, it took me a long time to get over it after I lost. It,
really?
oh yeah, I mean, it's like wow, this there I am on television being interviewed by the Channel 5. Oh boy, it's very alluring. So that's what I think this is about. I'm saying that from my own experience. They're going to get to find nobody's going to pay any attention to them. Trump certainly isn't. They're not relevant. So now they get to go up on the stage and they get to be seen by millions of people, and they get their big face on the people are going to talk about John Kasich, and but the
You
price
know,
that
his
they
father was
pay.
a mailman.
Oh yes, of course. The price that they have to pay for that is they have to kiss the you know what of the establishment, and they're doing that. I don't think it means anything.
Well, okay, but isn't it true in American history that people don't like traitors? I mean, look at Benedict Arnold. His life was ruined. They
Right.
hated him in Britain. Uh,
That's a good point.
so I'm not sure that your, personal ego thing and other politicians directly translates to this. In that, how
Well,
far
look,
would you go?
I think they don't understand that. All they see is the immediate,
Okay.
plum. They are going to be hated eventually. by both sides. That's
Yeah,
true.
yeah, that's what happens. Yeah,
Oh yeah, and but right now they're tools. They're good. They're being used positively by one of the sides, and they're willing to sacrifice it just with the assumption that this side is going to either win, or that this side has such an enormous cultural imprint that it won't affect them. And they may be right about that. They they might be able to ride it out because they're on the right side of history, they think, and they'll get rewarded. But yeah, I mean, ultimately they'll be thrown away just like any other trader, down the road once they're no longer of use. I
and they
think.
just don't see it.
No,
It's
right now they
incredible.
just see the floodlights is what they see. They see the book deals that they're going to write a book. They're going to get all these fantasies of flying through their heads of the great things they're going to do. They're going to reach people and become relevant again.
Wow.
And it ain't going to fly, I don't think.
Well, so we've come kind of a long way on this, starting with a poor
No, it's a great
innocent
talk.
kid, and I guess the last thing I just want to mention,
Yeah.
since we're just going freewheeling here, um, what's the eventual endpoint of this George Soros putting these people in as prosecutors? I mean, how
Oh my
long?
God! In another hour, I'm going to be talking to Cliff Kincaid about
Okay,
this,
yeah,
who's an expert on it, and he's been around for a long time. And it is a very sinister situation. He's one of the most evil people operating right now, and he's basically been able to buy up these district attorneys who are corrupt. The one in Chicago who let Jesse Smollett off, the
yeah.
one in St. Louis who's prosecuting that couple for defending their property against thugs who were breaking down the gate. They're all over the country. It is really something that is completely perverting our system of justice. And Soros knows where the weak points are. He knows he can get advantage, and apparently this is one of those areas. He can't stop Trump from appointing more conservative judges, so this is what he's trying to do.
Okay,
And
but what's the end game? Okay, you have people like Kim Fox in Chicago who's not prosecuting anybody. So first of all, how does she keep her job? Because even criminals don't like to be robbed. So
I don't know.
what, how does this all play out?
I think that it's going to come back to Hunter. I mean, even the mayor of Chicago, Lightfoot, who's a left wing, you know, woman, as far left as they come, even she's now,
You mean Beetlejuice? Yeah.
yeah, but she's now waking up and saying, hey, if you want to loot in the city, you go to jail. She just hired 1,000 new cops. She's now, she doesn't, ultimately she doesn't want to see her city burn.
Right.
She does. They pulled up the drawbridge on the
Well,
loop.
that's
I don't know
it.
if you saw. So I think that either they're gonna start flying right, or ultimately they'll be gone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is it. She can do that. She can put in more cops. And if this Kim Fox doesn't want to prosecute, I mean, that game can't be played forever. You know.
No, and I think eventually that's going to come back to bite her. I don't know. You'd have to think that, especially if Trump wins, which will be a wonderful day for this country.
Oh yeah.
Oh
What
my
would be
God!
the reaction? What would be the reaction of the left on
Same thing
the?
they did last time. They'll send out the Pussy Hat Brigade. Right. Well, they'll I love the one. There's some videos hysterical on YouTube. I don't know if they probably YouTube took them off, but do you remember? I think it was a year later that they had the Scream at Heaven, Scream at
Yes.
the
Yes.
Sky.
Yeah.
Oh man, there's some really funny videos of people like turning up to the sky and screaming. It's just it's a laugh. If you're ever feeling a little down, you got to see that. It's so funny. That and the way the reporters handled the Trump win. There's some great compilations. I don't know, maybe YouTube has censored them too, but
I think some of them are still on there, but
oh man, I
you're
mean, I
talking
tell you,
about the ones where they're going along and going along and going.
and then
Well, wait a minute.
yeah, and then they show Florida, and they keep
Yeah.
well, they still haven't counted the vote in, so, and then 1 hour later, well, there's still. it's like if you want to have a lift, if you're feeling a little blue, there's nothing more gripping than those videos. It's just so funny to watch their faces, to watch Rachel Maddow. Did you see that? Having a
Yeah.
meltdown. Oh my God. I don't know if they took that down. I don't know if YouTube is censoring that, but that is worth, I can't wait to see that again. That'll be a glorious moment when you see their scowls and their ashen faces again. It'll be a beautiful moment for this country.
Yes. From your lips to God's ear.
Oh, well. Anyway, so Michael, let my viewers and listeners know where they can read your articles.
Okay. The health stuff is on healthnewsdigest.com. And there's some interesting things on there that, we've gotten pretty long and deep into COVID. And some, I think the latest one has to do with the origin of the virus. I recommend that to people because there's an Italian professor who no one can accuse of being a conspiracy theorist, who points out exactly how this virus was engineered, why we know it was engineered. And it's some pretty good history of what's going on. So, and then when it gets into politics stuff, again, there's other little blogs, but mostly the health stuff I think people would enjoy.
Good, good. And where can they see it?
Okay, healthnewsdigest.com. I also run a mirror, which goes back to I've got stuff going back to the 90s on this mirror. On my business website, gasdetection.com, we make electronic instruments for safety for gas detection. And that's just added content on there.
Okay.
So, as always, you're the man.
Well, Mike, we'll do it again soon.
Absolutely.
This has been
Take
good.
care of
Thank you.
yourself.
You too.